$1 trillion of American corporate net worth just walked directly into the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. And Donald Trump gave Xi Jinping the ultimate geopolitical win by flying to Beijing alongside the absolute titans of American capitalism, Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Jensen Huang, Larry Fink, and a massive cohort of Wall Street and tech executives. Trump didn't project American strength. He exposed America's deep, structural, and completely unbreakable reliance on the Chinese economy. When the President of the United States lines up the world's most powerful tech, aerospace, and financial CEOs to introduce them to the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, asking for market access and commercial favors, the entire political narrative of decoupling completely collapses. Xi Jinping did not have to fight to win this round. He did not have to fire a single shot or launch a single cyber attack. All he had to do was sit back, look at a room full of the men who control America's critical infrastructure, technology, and capital, and listen to them express their deep desire for business stability. For leaders like Tim Cook, whose vast hardware supply chain remains anchored in Chinese factories, or Jensen Huang, who views China as a vital multi-billion-dollar market for advanced silicon and AI infrastructure, unrestricted access to Beijing is non-negotiable. By orchestrating this high-profile corporate pilgrimage, Trump effectively turned America's billionaire class into China's strongest defense shield. These CEOs do not want devastating trade wars, they do not want aggressive export restrictions, and they absolutely do not want a military conflict over Taiwan. Any minor disruption to the flow of goods across the Pacific destroys their stock prices, disrupts their quarterly earnings, and panics Wall Street. Back in Washington, these exact corporate titans will now become the most powerful, highly funded lobbyists for lenient, highly cooperative policies toward China, working from the inside out to protect their overseas investments. Despite years of aggressive trade rhetoric, escalating tariff threats, and tough-on-China political posturing from both sides of the aisle, this meeting demonstrated a harsh reality. The United States cannot separate its financial fate from Beijing. China did not need to defeat America economically or outpace it militarily to gain the upper hand. Trump brought America's corporate empire straight to Xi Jinping, signaling to the world exactly who holds the real leverage in the global economy. To truly grasp how deeply this event reshapes the balance of global power, you have to look past the surface-level press releases and examine the raw optics of what happened inside that room. This wasn't a standard diplomatic summit where career politicians exchanged dry talking points through translators. This was a literal display of American corporate subservience disguised as a master business deal. Trump took the very people who dictate the direction of the global economy, the heads of Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, and Boeing, and placed them directly in front of the Chinese state apparatus. When Trump introduced these executives one by one, telling Xi Jinping that these were the greatest business minds the world had ever seen, and explaining that they had come to pay respect to China, he handed Beijing a propaganda victory worth more than any trade concession. For years, the Chinese government has pushed a narrative that Western capitalism is volatile, hyper-individualistic, and ultimately dependent on China's massive manufacturing base and disciplined consumer market. By bringing the architects of Western tech and finance to Beijing to seek favors, the American administration validated that exact narrative on the global stage. Consider the immense leverage this gives Xi Jinping over the American tech sector. For a company like Apple, moving out of China is an existential nightmare that would take a decade to safely execute. For Nvidia, the restrictions placed on AI chip exports by Washington have already cost the company billions in lost revenue, forcing them to design specific downgraded chips just to keep their foot in the Chinese door. When Jensen Huang stands in the Great Hall of the People, he isn't representing American foreign policy. He is representing a corporation that needs access to Chinese buyers to justify its multi-trillion-dollar valuation. By allowing these executives to negotiate directly under the shadow of the Chinese state, the U.S. has shown that its domestic corporate interests will always heavily pressure its foreign policy decisions. Furthermore, this move completely undermines the strategic alliances the United States has spent years building across the Indo-Pacific region. Nations like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Australia have been pressured by Washington to restrict their own trade ties with China, secure their supply chains, and brace for an era of economic decoupling. Yet, while America demands that its allies take financial hits to counter Beijing's influence, the American president flies directly into China with a plane full of billionaires looking to sign massive new commercial deals. This blatant hypocrisy forces regional allies to question the reliability of American security and economic commitments, pushing them to quietly mend their own ties with Beijing rather than risk being left out in the cold. The corporate presence also creates a dangerous conflict of interest at the highest levels of American governance. When Elon Musk, who not only runs Tesla and SpaceX but also holds immense influence over government efficiency initiatives and defense contracts, is deeply integrated into the Chinese market through the massive Shanghai Gigafactory. His business interests are inherently tied to the stability of the Chinese state. If Beijing can influence the financial health of America's most prominent defense contractors and tech innovators simply by turning the valve on market access or regulatory approval, they gain a passive veto power over aggressive American policies. The ultimate irony of this summit is that it was framed as a victory for the American worker, pointing to verbal commitments for aircraft sales and agricultural purchases. But in reality, those short-term commodity deals are small change compared to the long-term structural power China just secured. Beijing has successfully weaponized Western corporate greed, transforming America's most powerful capitalists into an insurance policy against Washington's own geopolitical ambitions. As long as America's economic elite view China as an indispensable partner for their own personal survival and wealth creation, Beijing will continue to hold the real strings of global power, proving that the ultimate way to disarm an empire is to make its masters dependent on your marketplace.